Okay, we are recording.
All right, so we are here, the Operating Procedures Committee, and we are starting the meeting. I'm calling it to order at 6:05 p.m.
So I think the plan for tonight is to go over the operating procedures, which were posted in our folder. And Olga and I were talking right before the meeting, and we suggested maybe we do it section by section and give everybody a chance to read the section and read the notes. And then we can discuss each section, and we can go as far as we can get until 7 o'clock.
And specifically, we're reviewing the operating procedures for investigations, right?
Right. Which she's pulling up. Maybe you can make it, can you make it a little bit bigger?
Let me see.
And it's the draft 1/17/2024, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay.
See, I think if you go where it says where it says 100%.
Oh, yeah, there it is. I was looking for it.
Okay,
Is
yeah,
that better?
that's better. Yes.
Okay. And also just flagging that the committee doesn't have scheduled meetings after today, so if you could carve out some time before the end of today's meeting to also schedule your next meetings or maybe. But I'm happy to kind of take the lead of going through the procedure as Doug suggested, so I will put today's date on this draft. Table of content, we'll update it after we finalize it. First major section in the procedures is the introduction. I originally titled it background, but then I renamed it to introduction, so feel free to propose a different title for it, but it's more of a kind of introductory section. So if you haven't had a chance to read it, please take a moment and we can pause for any comments or questions.
So may I start with asking if everybody's had a chance to read it, then we can go dig right into it, or do folks need time to look at it? I'll assume that means folks need time to look at it.
I mean, I can still read it as you comment, so then we can look at it together. So it works well.
Oh, I mean, I'm not in any particular hurry. I was just wondering if everybody here had already taken a look, then we could skip that part.
I read it for
but
sure.
if we haven't, yeah, now it's read. So, but we won't worry about that in the future. As you can see, I just added a comment to that as I was reading it, rereading it this time, and that is this section says, and other significant incidents involving the police department. And I just wondering what the scope of that would be. How do we define that? How do we set parameters around that? Are there already some procedures or suggestions?
Yeah, those are already set later in the document.
So when we say other significant incidents involving the police department, that's part of, like, for instance, I know we talk about the 3 types of incidents and okay.
That's right. Yeah, and
Okay.
it comes directly from the ordinance.
Okay, gotcha.
So instead of kind of, writing all the other incidents here, it's more of an introductory
Okay.
paragraph. Any other questions or suggestions on this piece?
I mean, still writing.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
Commissioner, can you hear me right? Sorry.
Yeah.
Same as what Commissioner Honore said. Would there be an opportunity for us to just put the ordinance there, indicating specifically, I know we're gonna go into them in depth, but just so it's noted in there that we're referring to a specific section of the ordinance, so it's not vague. So it looks like we address that where it says the other significant incidents, because that also was my my first thought, because it mentions just like all deaths. Um. While the person was in custody, and I know we also look at other things. other incidents.
They all follow right after this section.
Mhm.
So this is where we go through them.
Or can we say like, instead of other incidents, could we say like type 1, 2, 3 incidents? Instead of, like, not necessarily like defining them, but just like indicating like 1, 2, 3.
Well, except, well, the first one is type 1.
Right, so these are already, we are naming type 1, 2, 3 here, and other significant incidents. They can be different, but I can suggest to address this comment, we can say and other significant incidents as
described below.
yeah, or as defined further in this procedure, something like that.
Yes, just
Sounds
so,
good. Yeah.
just to make sure that we're like hashing it out,
Mm-hmm.
that it's
Okay.
in there.
I will. Does that work, or do you want to phrase it a different way?
Like in this document,
fine.
or this procedure.
Me.
Okay. Any other suggestions or comments? Nope. Okay, so if everybody's good, we can move on to the next section. So that's what you were asking earlier. So it's important to have a clear jurisdiction defined in this piece. So I separated that in a separate jurisdictional section. And all of these, like the incidents and most of the criteria, come directly from the ordinance, except for the type 1 name. That's something that I took from Mr. Bennett's draft, so he separated those by type 1, type 2, type 3 incidents. So type 1 incidents, directly copy and paste. I'm gonna pause here to see if you have any questions or comments on the type 1 incidents.
Do you recall if the ordinance defines officer involved shootings?
I don't think so, but that's, yeah. I'm gonna double check right now.
Even if it's not in the ordinance, would it not be defined elsewhere in maybe other ordinances, or in somewhere in the police department policies and procedures as well?
Yeah.
We can define ourselves if we want to define it. I don't know if we want to, though.
Well, and I asked the question because it has risen in the past with regard to two things. One is well, the police department maintains that it doesn't include accidental shootings, accidental firings. And secondly, that it only involves shootings of people and not animals.
Okay, interesting.
That's accurate.
And
Yeah, the ordinance doesn't have, interestingly enough, it has definitions of some terms, but not this one.
but I think that would be good to have in writing somewhere what that authority is. I'm not sure I really want to word it except for does not include accidental shootings or shootings of animals, but that's been the department's policy or practice.
So Doug, are you asking if we want to just add that in, or have a definition somewhere else in the process that
Yeah, I think you probably should ask. I think we should have a definition, and maybe ask the department if they have a definition of officer involved shootings, rather than try to yeah, that occurred to me previously and I forgot to mention it, but we can follow up with that and see if they're,
I can check in their procedures before we ask, if you would
Yeah.
like.
yeah, that would be helpful. And then if it's
Also-
not there, maybe ask the, maybe I just ask the IA captain whose name, the new captain, that's name I've forgotten.
Peterson,
Yes, if they have, if they define it in any of their documents.
Do you think it'd be helpful if we also checked with the writers of the ordinance? What their definition, what they were thinking when they wrote that?
I think they just took it from the charter amendment. And I don't think that I don't think it's defined in the charter. If it was defined in the charter amendment, I'm sure it would have been defined in the ordinance. And so I think everybody just assumed they knew what an officer involved shooting was. And I thought I knew until those questions arrived of, because we had some situations of of a dog being shot and of a firearm going off accidentally. And we asked why they weren't given to us, and they said, well, that's not an officer involved shooting.
so I know that in the MOU for criminal investigation purposes, it's also noted in the countywide MOU among all those in departments. It's also noted that it's just, it doesn't include accidental discharges and discharges against animals. So I wonder if it's like for criminal purposes, but not necessarily for administrative purposes.
My suggestion maybe is, well, A, if the department doesn't have it defined, why don't we use the languages in the MOU?
So that language will be exclusatory though, so it will say.
I know. I kind of realize that, and that's not necessarily ideal, but that's kind of the point I want to make anyway. So
Okay, so we can, I can do some research on that. And then we can revisit this point in the next meeting. Does that sound okay?
that sounds great.
Okay, let me just
I
finish.
would like us to ask Andrea and anybody else who was involved in writing the ordinance or Measure B if they had a definition in mind. Because I would not want us to come up with our own definition and find out that it stands in contradiction to what they had in mind. They may be thinking, yeah, we're not worried about accidental, and we're not worried about dogs and cats and horses and that, but they may have been, right? So I think we should ask the framers what they were thinking, or what definition they were using, or where they got the idea from.
Yes, that is also why I unmuted, that if at least we can make a note on there to refer to the folks who were part of this, like writing the ordinance. We could just make a note there, like make sure to check in with folks who wrote the ordinance about it too.
Is anybody comfortable doing that? Does anybody have good contact with the folks who wrote the ordinance?
Would that be Andrea? Because
Yeah,
yes,
it'd be
go ahead, Doug. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that would be Andrea.
Oh yeah, I'll be happy to ask her.
But I'm guessing in terms of being, I think we'll get pushback if we try to say that we have the ability to investigate accidental shootings or shootings of animals, since that's not how countywide they define officer involved shootings.
Right, I understand and appreciate that disposition and perspective. But what I am also trying to do is make sure that the context within which this ordinance was written was not, we want the police department to tell us what an officer involved shooting or what any of their policies or procedures are. The context, if I understand of Measure B in the ordinance, is we're here to investigate what you're doing and make sure you're doing it correctly. So we don't want to be tied to your definitions of things if we think your definition is wrong. So I think we should investigate what the community had in mind when the community put this together and see if it's consistent with what the police department is saying. And if not, then I think we need to take another look and decide if we want to go with what the police department is saying. And there could be many good reasons to do that, or if we want to go push back ourselves on the police department and say, we hear you saying that, but we have enough community members whose dogs have been shot. We've seen enough incidents where an accidental a gun has gone off accidentally and someone's been harmed, and we think those should be included. I'm not saying that we should do that right now, but I'm saying we should check and see.
Okay.
And I'll be happy to check with Andrea on that.
Yeah, my guess is that she didn't really have a definition, and I would be careful about taking what Andrea's thoughts are and saying those were the thoughts of the community, because I love Andrea, but she doesn't, represent the entire community.
So then I would ask this question on the basis of that. We have an ordinance, and we know that Andrea was heavily involved in its development, but not exclusively. The ordinance was vetted through the community extensively, and went through a long process. So maybe not Andrea. If not Andrea, then my question would be, who out of the folks who wrote this Measure B and the ordinance, who would be the most appropriate person to ask a question about what your intent was? If we were a court, if we were attorneys or a court, right? We and this were a constitutional question, we'd be saying, what do the framers intend? Right. And we would want to make sure that we consider that when we make our decisions, that we don't want to do something that's in contradiction to what the framers intended. We may or may not have that, and maybe Andrea is not the best person, but I think we should, since we don't have a definition and we're not holding the police department's definition, we should check with our own. And I'm not saying to put that in necessarily, but I'm just saying, again, we should.
I think we definitely should check with Andrea. Okay. No, but and actually, the people who passed the ordinance or the charter on to the voters was the city council, who voted to put it on the ballot. And my guess is that nobody on the city council thought about a definition of officer involved shootings when they approved it. Probably nobody thought about it until on the commission. So I just raised the issue only because I knew that it was an issue in the past. But regardless, we probably shouldn't spend too much time here tonight, but we do need to have it, I think, defined, because it may come up in the future.
So these are all great points. So I just made note for what we will do about this piece. I will check in as DPD procedures, so they have definitions, and then if Commissioner Honoré could check in with Andrea. So this again, but just want to reinforce that the commission has the authority to interpret things the way you want to interpret things. Of course, not, out of thin air, but interpret and add and codify things the way the commission wants. But I think it's a good starting point for us to define officer involved shooting. I've seen in some procedures for other civilian oversight agencies, they are including definitions, and I think it's smart to definitely include it, and we can do some legwork for the next meeting. Does that sound okay for everybody?
That sounds good.
Yes, I just want to say that I definitely agree, and yes, we should check in with Andrea, but we should check in with Andrea in addition to another community member representative that was part of the creation of the ordinance. So having at least 2-3 folks in this meeting when we touch bases on the definition of officer involved shootings.
So I can take the lead on doing the research on his DPD procedures, but if you all want to take the lead on reaching out to other community members.
I think Clovis was volunteering to at least contact Andrea.
Yeah, I will do that. I have already done that, actually. I already sent her a text message.
Wow, quick. All right. So can we move on to the next section then? Okay, so the next one is type 2 incidents. So these are discretionary investigations, right? So this is mandatory for the commission to investigate type 1. Type 2 are discretionary, and they are also defined in the ordinance. So we don't have leeway on adding or removing things in this section. But we do have leeway in the defining how we approach and make a determination whether we want to take on discretionary investigations. So keeping that in mind, if you could take a couple moments to read this section and let me know when you're ready for me to scroll to the next page, and we can discuss any questions or comments.
Yeah, so are we going to discuss the area that you got a comment on that's highlighted there?
I was just gonna give everybody a moment to read first the section.
Okay.
Let me know when you're ready so I can scroll to the next page.
Ready.
Commissioner Honoré?
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
So where are we? What are we? Am I missing something?
We're just reading.
Oh, okay.
the section, the discretionary investigations.
Right, okay, thanks.
All right, is everybody good? Okay, so let's see if anybody has any questions or comments, and then we can go with addressing these comments first.
Let's address these comments.
Okay, so the investigations are discretionary, but it's important to have a process on how it will be determined when the commission will take on an investigation. As I was drafting this, per Doug's request, I checked in with Mr. Bennett as Doug wanted to get clarity on whether the commission needs to vote, whether to start an investigation or not. And my understanding is that the commission doesn't necessarily need to vote. It can establish a panel, an investigative panel as per this procedure, and your committee can decide, who will be part of this panel. And then the panel will have the authority to recommend to initiate an investigation. And these are just proposals, my proposals, so you're free to, discuss whether you're okay with that. And alternatively, the commission may vote every time it wants to start an investigation. The downside of this would be it can be time consuming, right? Investigations and incidents can happen swiftly. It's important to initiate those investigations quickly. And by the time the commission convenes the meeting, it may just be too bureaucratic and too time consuming. So my recommendation would be to give those powers to this panel. But you can modify this procedure, but it's certainly up to you how you would like to approach this process.
Can I assume this is not addressed in the bylaws?
This is not addressed in the bylaws.
Okay,
This is something that the commission can come up and
so this would
modify.
be, although it's called an investigative panel, would it not be an ad hoc committee or something like that? Or is this something different?
You can call it any way you like. This is just my suggestion of how to name it.
We named we did a similar thing with the disciplinary procedures. And we had a panel, and I think I chose the word panel because it's different than committee, and the bylaws refer to committees. And so that's why I wanted to, have it be a separate designation.
So one of the deals with the commission, of course, and with standing committees versus ad hoc committees is what's it called? Bacon Davis? No, it's not Bacon Davis. What's it called? The act that we can't violate, Brown Act. There you go.
Mhm.
And so how does calling this a panel either impact that activity? Hey, where'd I go? I'm moving around, so I guess my camera is not picking me up.
I don't think it has any effect on the Brown Act because the panel, we can specify that it will have like less than a quorum if you're concerned with the Brown Act, but other than that, when I was drafting it, I wasn't envisioning it being, half of the commission. I was envisioning it just as maybe pre-selected group of commissioners who agree to be on that panel and maybe voted by the commission, something like that, but opening up the floor for further discussion.
Well,
Yeah,
I'd
but
say
the,
there's no, go ahead, play that.
yeah, but under the Brown Act, the standing committees, regardless of whether they have a quorum or they have a majority of the commission on it or not, are still subject to the Brown Act.
Right.
Whereas ad hoc committees are not. And I guess my suggestion is to keep it as an investigative panel and maybe ask the question of Mr. Bennett, whether
Yeah.
or not the panel meetings of the panel would,
Yeah.
'cause it's kind of like an internal meeting of they're not well, I mean, it probably would be good to ask the question of whether or not they are subject to the Brown Act, and I guess the same question would apply to the disciplinary review panel.
Okay, I made a note of that.
Although it's clear that one was intended to be more ad hoc because that panel was intended to be it was envisioned that it might fluctuate with membership. We don't have to specify it in this document whether it's subject to the Brown Act or not, but we probably ought to. Let me ask a devil's advocate question. I like the option you're presenting here.
Me too.
But if there is a commissioner or group of commissioners who feel that a particular incident ought to be investigated by the commission, and the panel doesn't agree or did not reach that decision, what option would they have?
That's a good question. I mean, I would say the panel has the say, so probably no recourse, but if you'd like to add something, sure. But again, my recommendation is to approach this procedure from efficiency standpoint and to make it as fewer roadblocks as possible for initiation, streamlining of investigations, to eliminate those roadblocks because they're very time sensitive. No good answer, but if you'd like to add something, please.
No, I wasn't suggesting adding anything. I was just, it was more of a devil's advocate, but
Yeah.
But I guess that the commissioners could, talk to the panel and try to convince the panel to
Well, what
to
the
do it.
decisions of the panel be subject to the entire commission as a commission were to vote to pursue something that the panel would have to pursue that. It would not be an option if the entire commission says, hey, we want this investigated, or majority vote, or if by majority vote that the commission said, hey, panel, we want this investigated, the panel would have to investigate it. They wouldn't have the option of saying no or no to the entire commission, right? Under Robert's Rules of Order, it would seem that an order given to a committee, subcommittee, or panel established by the commission would be under the jurisdiction of the commission, and would do the commission's bidding. And if they chose not to, we just get rid of them and get somebody who's going to do what we asked them to do, because that's what they're supposed to do, right? And by virtue of the same, if the commission voted no, if the panel said we don't want to do it, and the commission voted to agree with the panel, then that's it. The issue's over. But I think we should check with the, I agree with Doug, we should check with the council to see what the Brown Act effect are. Other than that, I like it. I think it all looks real good.
Okay. And are you comfortable with the composition of the panel?
Well, I threw only one thing in there, the idea that it would be as opposed to the cabinet and or members of the cabinet. That way it can be one cabinet member or all cabinet members or any number of, and we wouldn't have to have the whole cabinet as the way it was written might have suggested, although I'm sure it didn't have to be that way because it says
Yeah, that
select.
makes
But yeah,
sense.
I just threw that in there. Other
Okay.
than that, yes, I think the language is good, fine.
Any other comments about this piece before we move on to the next comment in the section?
So just overall, like I'm definitely looking forward to see what Mr. Bennett has to say about it, but definitely like when the question is like it says the commission will establish the investigative panel, but simply like establishing that panel too is also a question that comes up. Like how would that distribution or like how would we eventually like determine, like, is it just people who volunteer for it? So definitely, I think we should definitely work on that one at some point to get more into like the details of it. But yes, those are my thoughts.
These are all good comments, but I would just also advise to keep it general, and then the practicalities can play out later, how it will be determined who will be in the commissioners on the panel, similarly to what was done with the discipline procedure, because we want this to be general without codifying us and putting us into brackets, because this will go through meet and confer. And if something happens 5 years later and the commission wants to modify it, then you know, it will not be. It may create issues if we define narrowly how we're going to select those panel members. Keeping it general has its benefits to it, but you know, we can brainstorm on the practical side of it after we're done with this for sure. I agree.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Because I'm sure the commissioners will have those same questions when it goes to the entire commission for vote.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I had another comment here in the section about, and it's only here because this is the first time where this kind of comes up. So it's not necessarily relevant to the type 2 incidents, but it's more of a definitions of some of the parties that may be involved in the investigation. The ordinance names complainants specifically as some of the parties. I think it may be referring to witnesses, maybe not. It is referring to officers as subjects, but it does not further define who are the parties who may be involved. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be defined, but as a matter of practice, from what I know from other civilian oversight bodies, it's good to differentiate between complainants versus impacted parties. Complainants are usually just people who file complaints, because we can have a third party complainant, right? They don't necessarily are the parties who were impacted by officer conduct. And impacted parties are actually the ones who experience the conduct. So this is something not necessarily that may need definition in this particular procedure. It may be definition, it may need definition in the complaint procedure when the committee gets to it, but I'm just putting it for the committee's consideration of whether you want to introduce this term in this procedure, because it will become relevant in investigations. And if you would like to introduce it, how you would like to name it. There are different variations. It can be victim. Not everybody likes the word victim. It can be impacted parties, aggrieved individuals. These are some of the terms that I've seen around in other agencies, and I'm opening up.
I like your recommendation. I think it is important to include them because, you know, sometimes the impacted party, you know, doesn't file a complaint, and it's a different and so I think it's important to include it the impacted parties, and I like personally the term impacted parties over victim or aggrieved parties.
Me too, personally.
Yes, I definitely think that we should define it. I think definitely the complaint procedures or ordinance or yes. the
Complaint procedures. Mhm.
Yes, when the time comes to be, so we should definitely define that at some point.
Doug, question for you. Do you, Commissioner Honore, I hear you, I see your thumbs up. Doug, question for you. So do you think it's necessary to make a definition here, or we can just introduce this term and then, you know,
I don't think we need to define it there, is my opinion. But you're right, it may be good to define when we get to the complaint procedure.
okay.
I mean, this document, since is this the first time where we see it, or is there another document also? Oh, then if it is the first time that we're seeing it, then maybe we should define it. In that case, yes, okay, I had missed that point. Like, is there a place where we have all the definitions, or could we just define it like right then and there?
Indeed. So maybe I can make a footnote instead of introducing it as a definition in the document. I can make a footnote. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's fine.
So does that mean we're gonna separate each of these
I don't think we need to, we need to,
persons? And then.
I don't
give them
think we
each
need
their
to like
own-
identify complainants or whatever, but impacted
Mhm.
parties may be worth and now that I think about it, it may be good to have a definition, because a person can, you know, who may not be the quote victim, but they can make the argument that I'm part of the community and I've been impacted by this situation. And
Okay, so I can make a footnote and then just define this term, because it will be the first time it will be seen in any of the operating procedures, if you're comfortable with this approach.
okay,
And then another alternative definition that came to mind when I first read it, my understanding was by referring to impacted parties, like it also referred to like impacted organizations as well. So it's not very so it's not very specific in that sense. So that can also be another way that people interpret it. So we want to have that.
yeah. Maybe you can find a definition in another agency of aggrieved parties.
Yeah,
The term I've seen most often is aggrieved parties, but I like the term impacted parties better. But if you can
Okay.
find it, maybe New York defined it.
yes, it definitely did.
Okay, then you
I
can just take
I'm
it.
gonna chime and let you guys know, my computer keeps wanting to restart. So if I, for some reason, do not see it pop up and snooze it and I suddenly disappear, that would be the reason why.
Okay, thanks for the heads up. Okay, yeah, so just to sum up, I will find some definitions of this term and make a footnote, and we'll codify it here and then in the complaint procedure as well, because that's where it's going to play out most of the time. Any other comments about this section about type 2 incidents? I see no. Okay.
I
So,
have
yeah.
a quick question, just in regards to this bullet point and like the section we were looking at. Could you mind scrolling up a little bit for me? It was dishonesty by a police officer directly related to reporting. Does that include when officers move officers around to avoid? I'm not sure if there's a word for it. I read about it somewhere in like a reading. But it's like when like not charges are gonna be faced with, but when there's an investigation happening and then an officer moves another officer to avoid like the officer being like reviewed for disciplinary actions like throughout the investigation, but they like move them. Like, does that fall in that or no?
Do you mean if an officer is transferred from like one unit to another?
Yes. Or like from one position to another position, or
Mhm.
just like moved internally, during an investigation. Like, does that also relate to, like, where would that go? Would that go here or would that go in like?
Yeah, I don't think that would be considered dishonesty. Dishonesty is,
Mm,
basically lying in a police report or lying in a interview or lying to your, you know,
Okay,
supervisor.
okay, so yeah, no, it doesn't apply.
Mhm.
So then that begs the question, where, following up on Commissioner Rubio's statement, I'm thinking, where do we investigate or do we investigate? How shall we describe it? I think she was saying something that might be uh, something the department does to avoid an investigation, right? Not something that a particular officer does. Now I know that officers can resign to avoid certain kinds of investigations, but I wasn't aware that an officer could be moved or demoted or promoted or or shifted to another department or another station. Or does a department do that to get police officers out of trouble?
I never heard of that because I think they would still be, I mean, if they were involved in an incident, they're still subject to the investigation.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm not aware of that either, but I want to bring your attention that most of the type 2 incidents, right, they are related to specific incidents or complaints.
Right.
But the 5th one is more broad.
Okay.
It's an incident where data shows a pattern of inappropriate policies, procedures, or practices of the
Okay.
police department
Yeah.
or its members.
Okay. Yeah.
So if I would say this is probably if there is a concern about certain actions, this is where the commission does have the power to investigate
Okay.
on a larger scale.
Yeah, the word I couldn't think of before is cover up.
Cover up,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but okay, that looks like we've got that covered. Okay.
Yeah, and that's also just defined by the ordinance. We don't have any leeway here.
Right.
Okay, any other questions on this one?
I
No.
didn't have it.
You did have one though?
No, I said I don't have any.
Okay, so I know we have about 10 minutes before the end of the meeting. Type 3 section is pretty short. I don't know if you would like to do that one quickly and then discuss the meeting schedule, or if you want to pause here, let me know. Do we want to do a quick review of this one?
Yeah, section 3 is pretty,
Yeah, it's a discretionary investigation specifically about sexual conduct, sexual misconduct, and domestic violence. This is also by the
Physical assault.
ordinance.
Yeah.
And then it just says that the same criteria that
Right.
apply to type 2 incidents will be used to determine when and how to start these investigations. And this last paragraph is directly, most of it is directly from the ordinance, which also just specifies some additional things the commission can do and also cannot do during the investigations.
I don't know the legal language, but just coming out of general language, that first sentence, as related to discretionary investigations, the commission may investigate any allegations of misconduct that become known to the commission during an investigation pursuant. It follows the process. There's something discontinuous in that part of the sentence. During an investigation pursuant, it follows. That I don't know.
Yeah, this is
So it
something
sounds
that I
weird.
added, and as I'm reading it, the grammar may not be that good in this sentence. So we can remove this last piece if you want.
No, I don't. I just want to understand what it means, because again, I don't. If it's legal, if it's a particular legal language, I don't understand the way it's constructed. That's all.
What I meant by this sentence is that if the commission is doing discretionary investigations, and let's say it's investigating a force incident and it comes across other allegations as they're doing this investigation, then it can also investigate those other allegations. But by including pursuant, it follows the procedure of initiating such investigations, I meant that it's not, I wanted to include the language to indicate that the commission is not going to just initiate investigations on its own. It will only be specifically to those discretionary investigations. So that's the
Okay.
point. I don't know if we want to rephrase that.
Oh, no, I'm
differently.
not sufficiently familiar with the word pursuant to know whether or not the phrasing is correct. It's just, I haven't seen it that way before, but I just don't know the word that well myself. So I just, if
Well,
it's fine with everybody else, I'm fine with it. I just didn't.
Well, I agree with Clovis. It doesn't, I mean, pursuant doesn't seem to be the right word there.
Mhm.
And I don't know. Again, I'm not familiar enough with the word pursuant to know if it should or shouldn't be there. It's just my own history, right? I just don't know that, but it might be perfect.
And is this a sentence, I mean, this paragraph related just to a type 3 incidents, or is this like a concluding paragraph?
This is more of a concluding paragraph for all investigations. So this piece directly from the ordinance, misconduct. These two, like this first introductory part and the last, I just added myself.
If anything, because it's under the type 3, is there some way that we can indicate that it's referring to all 3 types of incidents?
Well, type 1 is
Mhm.
not the discretionary, so
This is still part of this jurisdictional section.
Mhm.
So I can make like another subheading maybe.
Yes.
yeah, that might make it clear.
Yeah. Okay, I
Uh,
can make a note for myself here. I'm just gonna make a note so I can play around with how to add the subheading, but I'll do that.
Yeah, or maybe, yeah, I'm not quite sure how to, how to make it clear that that's not part of the type 3, but it's a,
You can say like.
That's why I put
individual-
related to discretionary investigations, or I can make it more clear as related to type 2 and type 3 investigations.
yeah, that's maybe what I would suggest, because then if you say that, then it's pretty clear that it's not related to just type 2 and 3. So maybe that's the solution, is to say as related to type 2 and type 3 investigations.
That looks better.
And I can still make a separate heading if you'd like.
Yeah, I think if we do that, we don't need a heading. But I would maybe change the word pursuant to maybe just if.
Mm-hmm. Or assuming, I maybe can just remove it. now that I read
Yeah,
it.
well, I agree. It doesn't necessarily need to be there. So
Yeah, I would say if there are concerns with, and confusion, maybe just remove this completely, if everybody's okay.
Yep, that's okay.
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 Oh, boy.
Any other notes for this one?
Okay.
So this one says that we cannot investigate a complaint where we were asked by a complainant not to investigate it.
Which is an interesting thing that I just thought of, that the ordinance indicates that well, the ordinance makes an assumption that the complainant is the impacted party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And but I guess we're still locked into the ordinance that says that it's at the discretion of the complainant. But what if you have a third party complainant who wanted a incident investigated, but the impacted party didn't want it investigated. What
Yep.
happens then?
That's a good question.
Th-
Mm,
That
I
somebody
would-
should have raised back when they were developing the ordinance, but
Right. And also the question of definitions.
I wonder if we also want to add, though, about the impacted party, if the impacted party requests that the complaint be handled without an investigation.
So I think we do need this differentiating definition for a complainant versus anybody else, right? Because we already have some language that says if a complainant says, I don't want the commission to invest, if the complainant says, I don't want the commission to investigate, we have to back off. So
wait, hold on for a second, say that but I guess if the impacted party, so say you had a third party complaint
Mhm.
and when they were contacted, they say, I don't want this done as an informal investigation. I want it handled informally. But the impacted party does want it pursued.
Then they would need to file a complaint,
Okay, and then
Mhm.
right?
Then
Because
they
if a
would-
complainant says don't, the ordinance says we can't. Right,
Right.
specifically. So if the other person does want it, then the other person needs to become a complainant and then we can.
okay, and so and I agree with you, but just playing devil's advocate because somebody will always rule down the road. If one complainant, if two people complain about an incident, one complainant says, please do a formal investigation, and another complainant of the same incident says, I don't want an investigation. Does the ordinance that says that if a complainant doesn't want it investigated, that it won't be?
Good question. What if?
Yeah, I mean, as I was drafting it, there are definitely a few holes in the ordinance that that come up now.
Yeah, it doesn't
Um,
address multiple complaints. Maybe we should ask our attorney that question.
Yeah, I can ask from a practical standpoint, but do we want to write in about if the impacted party asks not to do an investigation?
I think again, it goes back to definitions. If we have a complainant who has filed a complaint form, we are required, well, obviously we're not necessarily required, and we'll say it this way. If we have a complainant who files a complaint form and they say, I do not want this investigated, we are obligated by ordinance not to investigate it. If there's somebody else who's interested, that can't override the ordinance, right? So if the complainant says no and somebody else says yes, that's too bad. Now, if the complainant says no and the other person becomes a complainant, that's the conflict we're talking about now that I think we need to have our attorney address.
I'm talking more about a scenario where the complainant files a complaint, but impacted party tells us, I don't want you to investigate this incident.
Again, I think our ordinance and our ordinance says we investigate. I mean, it's at our discretion, right? These are discretionary in the first place. I mean, that's something we can take into consideration. But if we have a complainant and we talk to the complainant and they say we want it investigated, and some other person says they don't want it investigated, it would seem automatically that the complainant would take precedent. But again, maybe that's a question for our attorney.
I think they're both two different situations, and
Right.
we should definitely have language in there for both of those.
In practice, it comes up a lot where an incident will generate, an attention from community members, but the person who is affected by the incident itself doesn't want to go through with that. So those are the situations that will come up, and I think it's important to also figure out what we're going to do with that situation.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, well, and perhaps another option is because these are discretionary investigations, and so maybe we can say that the commission may take into but is not required to take into consideration the what's the word, not the desire of the impacted parties.
Enroll without an investigation for the commission. Okay, do we want to come back to that after we check in, I check in with Mr. Bennett? Okay,
Yeah, let's come back to that, but I kind of like that idea because, you know, I think that we should take into consideration what the quote victim desires. Sometimes it may be appropriate for the commission to proceed with an investigation, even if the impacted party doesn't want it. But I think it makes sense to say that we will take into consideration the desire of the impacted party.
okay. I like that idea, and then we can revisit it. And actually, now that you're saying it, I remember that down the road in the procedure, we will get to the dispositions. And we will be discussing when a case can be closed as no finding. And there will be an instance if, let's say, we didn't get in touch with a complainant or an impacted party, that we can close it as no finding. So I think it can also play out there. So we can definitely come back to that one in the next meeting. I see that we're at 7:01. Do we want to read this last sentence? So this is just to say, it's also from the ordinance that it says that commission cannot investigate complaints against employees of the police department who are not police officers. So let's say 911, dispatchers, administrative staff, lab staff, etc.
Right.
Yeah, that comes directly from the ordinance.
And we're using the term police officer. Do we need sworn officer? Do we need any other clarity and definition of who those folks who are we can investigate, or is police officer sufficient?
Police officer is defined in the ordinance.
Okay.
It means the peace officer as defined by and with the authority set forth in the California Penal Code.
Gotcha. That works. Okay, I'm good.
Okay.
All right.
So we need to decide if we want to. I'm fine with our current meeting schedule of meeting on
Wednesdays.
On Wednesdays. Well, I guess the commission is meeting on the 2nd and 4th. Is that right?
So the February month is a little off. Yes, so the commission is meeting on the. Well, no, I think it's meeting every first and third Wednesday.
Okay, then maybe we should meet on the 2nd and 4th. And if there is a 5th Wednesday in a month, we get a week off.
So you said second. There, so the commission, you said it's first and third. Is that the commission?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, these are not in my calendar because I'll be out of town. But I'll be back for this one.
So would that be the 7th and the 21st of February?
Right.
Yeah.
That's when the commission is meeting. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me just, before I agree, let me look at my own calendar to make sure that it works.
And just flagging, if that's the schedule you would want to go with, then the next committee meeting will be on February 14th. So we'll be.
Oh, that's not.
1, 2, 3 weeks from now.
Yeah, I'm not going to be available on February 14th.
And it's also a holiday.
Yeah, so that maybe that's why we decided to
7th. How come my compute my Outlook calendar does not populate with?
Although actually
Thursdays also work well for me.
Actually, I'm thinking, I just remembered that I thought there was a conflict, but hold on a second. Let me find
whatever. So what are we at? Where are we at? We're trying to figure, we're looking for Wednesdays.
Yeah, in my
So
calendar.
if
Okay,
second and fourth
I
Wednesdays
lost my
work.
audio somehow.
If
Yeah.
second and fourth Wednesdays work for everybody, I think the committee will just need to decide when is the next meeting. If you want
I hear
to,
you now.
Yeah,
Okay.
and hold on a second, just 1 second, we pull up my calendar.
alternatively, you can pick some random dates for this month and then stick to second and fourth Wednesday, starting with the March, to have a more permanent schedule.
Uh,
Or do like Tuesdays, let's say, this month, or Mondays or Fridays or Thursdays, but Wednesdays the rest of the year.
Okay, hold on just 1 second. I'm sorry to. We're gonna
Sorry,
try
my
to,
audio dropped out for a moment there. Where are we at? What are we up to?
we're trying to figure out if we're gonna meet on, so the next one, our next meeting will be on the 14th, right?
Okay, I will be
And then I'm-
unavailable.
You'll be unavailable?
Yeah, I'll be in Cozumel.
I will also be unavailable on the 14th.
Okay, so it sounds like maybe we had to pick a different date than the 14th.
Well, I'll be out of town for 2 weeks, starting from February, basically February 2nd to February 19th. So I'm gone for the 2 weeks.
So we're not gonna see you, Commissioner Honoré?
Not unless you fly out to one of the places that cruise ship is going to land, or unless you're on the same cruise I'm on.
What, and there's not,
Alright.
and there's not Wi-Fi in your cruise?
We are not paying, what is it, $10 a day per person for 14 days. Yeah, we're not paying $300 for 2 weeks for an internet. No. They have it, we're not buying it.
No
Um,
worries.
so, and, um,
So I propose maybe not doing Wednesdays in February and then doing other days, and then in March, get back to second and fourth Wednesday.
I agree.
okay, okay, and then let me see, look at my, so we need to pick a day that week, and
So my better days would be
Oh.
Tuesday, so I can do the 20th.
oh, so maybe this, but I don't think the 20th will. Well, hold on a second. Sorry about this. So we're looking at the 20th, which is a Tuesday.
Would the committee still want to meet also early in February as well, another week early in February?
The week
When
of
are you going out of
the
town,
9th?
Clovis?
I leave on the 2nd,
And
so next Friday next week.
Or like the last days of December?
Huh?
Oh, I'm sorry,
December.
January.
I like December. We kind of missed that one.
well, actually, now that I think about it, well, the 31st is a 5th Wednesday. So there wouldn't be a conflict, and how
That'll
would that work for everybody?
That will work for
The
me.
31st?
So
Uh-huh.
yeah, next Wednesday.
Yes, that works.
Yeah. That works for me too.
At
Okay.
6 p.m. No,
At 6 o'clock,
6:30?
I have something that goes until 5:30, but it's only a mile away, so I should be able to get back in time for the meeting. So let's do,
Do we want to do 6:30 to 7:30?
that works for you
me.
guys. Does that work for you,
Sure.
Clovis?
Then it gives you more time to also head home.
Okay, let's do that. And then we won't, and then we'll meet on the, let me get this on my calendar. Okay, and so then we would not meet on the 14th, but we could meet on the 28th. Would that work for people? 28th of February?
Yes,
That works for me.
And is that okay with you, Clovis?
I was putting this one in, so give me a hot second and I'll check and see. 6:30 policies and procedures. Okay, that's in there. So you said the 28th
28th
of
Yes.
February?
of February, yeah. So our usual meeting time, which would be 6 o'clock on the 4th Thursday.
Yeah, that should work.
Okay, and then why don't we just say,
And do you want to stick then afterwards to the second and fourth Wednesday?
yeah, I'd say doing that through 2027. I'm just kidding.
Right. I was gonna say maybe through May. Because now that's every Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm
So-
hoping we
so-
can get this all completed before
Right. Right.
before June 30th, when I expire from the commission.
Is that when our 1-year people expire?
Yes,
Okay, so I'm on that same list.
Me too.
but I'm not planning on seeking reappointment, and so this way I want to get it done before June 30th.
All right, so the committee has a lot of work ahead of you. By June. Okay, so is it
Okay.
fair to note then January 31st, 6:30 PM, and then from there on, it will be February 28th, and then from there on, every second, fourth Wednesday through May at 6 PM.
Okay,
Okay.
All
and
right,
I'm gonna get to bed early tonight because I have to report at 4 o'clock in the morning for the point in time count of the homeless.
Oh, wow. Thank you for doing it.
So, well, thanks,
Um,
everybody.
thank you, commissioners, and then we can reconvene next week.
All right. We'll see y'all
Okay,
next Wednesday. Well,
thank you.
see
Thank you
y'all.
very
Some of
much,
y'all I'll probably see
everyone.
tomorrow, and then I'll see the rest of y'all on Wednesday.
All right, have a good night.
Bye.
You too. God bless.
Bye.
Peace.